All right, my name is Laura Gins. Thanks so much for being here and being part of the infrastructure category meeting. I'm going to let the participants in now. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today for our infrastructure category meeting, which is being recorded. My name is Laura Gins, and I work with the League of Women Voters of Wisconsin as their legislative coordinator and administrative assistant. Daniel Sparacino will be providing the technical support for today's meeting. And I would like to welcome the highly esteemed Ann Batiza, our moderator for this program from the League of Women Voters of Wisconsin, Milwaukee County League.
Thank you, Laura. I want to say welcome to this Wisconsin League of Women Voters and American Society of Civil Engineers Wisconsin branch Invest in Wisconsin's infrastructure program on drinking water and wastewater, the 6th of 7 category meetings on ASCE's 2020 infrastructure report card. We will hear from 2 ASCE professional engineers about Wisconsin's drinking water and wastewater infrastructure categories, and we will get 5 different perspectives on drinking water and wastewater from the Superintendent of Milwaukee Water Works, the Wisconsin DNR Bureau Director from the Division of Environmental Management, Drinking Water and Groundwater, from the City Utility Manager for Water and Wastewater from the City of Ashland, from the parent lead at the Coalition on Lead Emergency, or COLE, and the administrator of the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin's Division of Water Utility Regulation and Analysis. After the presentations, we welcome our audience to participate in a Q&A with all the authors and panelists. This program is being recorded and will be available on the League of Women Voters of Wisconsin YouTube channel for those, particularly elected officials, unable to attend. I am Ann Batiza, Vice President for Organization and Co-Chair of the Natural Resources Committee at the League of Women Voters of Milwaukee County and its representative to COLE, the Coalition on Lead Emergency. I will be your moderator today. I have a master's in curriculum instruction, and my PhD is from the University of Wisconsin-Madison in cellular and molecular biology. I'm the author of a trade textbook for young adults and was the director of SUN, Students Understanding Energy, at Milwaukee School of Engineering. Next slide, please. Our agenda for today's meeting is shown here. First, we will provide some brief introductions to this collaboration between the League of Wisconsin and the Wisconsin branch of the ASCE. That will be followed by 20-minute presentations about drinking water by Carl Sutter, who is the director of the Wisconsin branch of the ASCE, the American Society of Civil Engineers, and by Jennifer Hurlibus, the author of the Wisconsin report card section on wastewater. After that, each of our panelists will present for 5 minutes. Then the presenters and panelists will be here for the Q&A with you. All of this will be concluded with closing remarks and next steps, including a call to action. Next slide, please. Why is the Wisconsin League working with the Wisconsin ASCE? In September of 2020, the ASCE Wisconsin branch published the 2020 Wisconsin Infrastructure Report Card. Then they invited the Wisconsin League of Women Voters to join them in educating the public about the report card, and the League voted to accept their invitation. The report card evaluates 13 categories of infrastructure: aviation, bridges, dams, drinking water, energy, hazardous waste, inland waterways, ports, roads, solid waste, stormwater, transit, and wastewater. Infrastructure, all of us rely on every day. While energy received a grade of B, adequate for now, the rest of the categories received C's, mediocre, needs attention, or D's, poor, at risk. The report card is a heads up that we can't take these systems for granted. They are aging. Infrastructure crosses local and state jurisdiction and requires public financing. These systems are designed to serve the public and protect the public and the environment. Because we, the people, ultimately pay for Wisconsin's infrastructure, we will be asked to pay to fix it and address arising issues such as the COVID pandemic and climate change as well. Thus, it is our civic responsibility to become better informed and our civic duty to contact our elected officials with informed input. The LWV of Wisconsin supports increased investment in infrastructure. We need to fund ongoing operations and maintenance, improvements, and innovation. As we learned during the previous overview meetings, we can raise infrastructure grades and also pass valuable assets on to everyone's children and grandchildren. Next slide, please. Carl Sutter is Senior Vice President of the Environmental and Infrastructure Division of McMahon Associates in Neenah, Wisconsin. He is a professional engineer and certified construction specifier with a BS degree in civil and environmental engineering from UW-Madison. He has over 40 years of experience in engineering, most of it in the public realm of environmental and infrastructure engineering. Now, Carl will give a brief description of the ASCE, the American Society of Civil Engineers. Next slide, please.
Thank you very much, Ann. The American Society of Civil Engineers, or ASCE, is the oldest professional engineering organization in the United States. It is a not-for-profit society and was founded in 1852 in New York City. It is worldwide with over 150,000 members in 177 countries. It also consists of 9 institutes which specialize in specific areas of civil engineering. These institutes are architectural engineering, coasts, oceans, ports, and rivers, construction, engineering mechanics, environmental and water resources, geotechnical, structural, transportation and development, and utility engineering and surveying. The Wisconsin section of ASCE was established in 1923. It comprises most of the state with the exception of the area near Superior and consists of 4 branches and 1,886 members. ASCE works to raise awareness of the need to maintain and modernize the nation's infrastructure using sustainable and resilient practices, advocates for increasing and optimizing investment in infrastructure, and improve engineering knowledge and competency. Civil engineers are global leaders building a better quality of life. Our society mission is to provide essential value to our members and partners, advance civil engineering, and serve the public good. Our code of ethics lists that engineers, first and foremost, protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public. This presentation is part of our advocacy and education effort. At this time, I'd like to introduce Louise Petering, immediate past president of the League of Women Voters of Wisconsin, who will give a brief introduction to the League of Women Voters. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Carl. With 2,800 members in the local leagues seen on this map, our work is recognized by partners and donors. Over 5,000 members and supporters across Wisconsin contribute to our mission to empower voters through education and advocacy and to defend democracy. While we are a political organization, we are nonpartisan and neither support nor oppose political parties or candidates. Our political action is based on our issue positions established after member studies of diverse sources, discussion, and consensus. As an organization of 101 years, It is our long-held and more recent positions that root our advocacy. Advocacy in the interest of good government of, by, and for the people, all people. League members have a natural interest in investing in infrastructure because how we build and manage our infrastructure determines the health of people and communities, the health of our environment, and the health of our economy. Now back to our moderator, Ann Battiza.
Thank you, Louise. Next slide, please. The drinking water category of the 2020 Wisconsin Infrastructure Report Card garnered a grade of C-, which is between mediocre, which requires attention, and poor, meaning at risk. Carl Sutter, who is the director of the ASCE Wisconsin branch, will present the section on drinking water, although the lead author of this section of the 2020 report card was Justin Bilskemper. While you're listening to the drinking water and wastewater presentations and subsequent talks by members of the panel, please enter your questions in chat and let us know to whom to direct the question. Laura Gentz, LWV of Wisconsin, will be monitoring the chat. We will address your questions after we finish hearing from panelists. Next slide, please. Before we proceed, I would like to tell you about the lead author of the drinking water section. Justin R. Bilskemper is a registered professional engineer in the Madison, Wisconsin office of Strand Associates, where he's worked for over 15 years, primarily on water supply related projects such as those given here. Water system studies and master plans, well facility and booster station design, hydraulic computer modeling, and assisting with funding and regulatory compliance. Justin has been active in the ASCE since being a student at the University of Wisconsin-Platteville, where he received his BS in civil engineering in 2006. Carl Sutter will now give the drinking water presentation. Next slide, please. Carl, we can't hear you.
I think he's on mute. No, it's a recording. It should be playing.
Yeah. Does everyone hear the audio now? Let me see if restarting the stream will help.
Thank you for attending the presentation of the drinking water category of
Is
the
that better, Ann?
2020
Yes.
Wisconsin
Okay.
Infrastructure Report Card in conjunction with the League of Women Voters of Wisconsin. Access to reliable, safe infrastructure improves the quality of life and sets the table for underlying systems that must support it, namely our infrastructure. Clean water, surface and drinking water, is among the categories of infrastructure that directly affect our ability to live, work, play, and produce economic expansion and development. Infrastructure provides the foundation of our state's economy as it is integral to preserving our high quality of life. Much of Wisconsin's infrastructure requires capacity or maintenance upgrades, or is reaching the end of its expected lifespan. Systems built decades ago need upgrading to better prepare for security threats, larger storm events, increased use of renewable fuels, new technology, and a changing population. The Wisconsin ASCE Report Card Committee of Engineering Experts assessed the overall Wisconsin grade as a C and the drinking water grade as a C-. We can do better, and we strive to reach a B grade. Some of our recommendations to increase this grade include increase overall investment across all infrastructure sectors to ensure safe, resilient, and reliable systems to maintain and improve the quality of life and economic health for Wisconsin residents. Leadership at the state and federal levels must have targeted discussions and build consensus to facilitate necessary updates for outdated infrastructure based on the needs of Wisconsinites. Along with increased investments, efficiencies and new technologies can help bridge the gap between smart investment and overall infrastructure needs, encourage new methods of design and construction, and defray costs while providing for a better future for Wisconsin. Project priorities should be set for investment in the state's most outdated and overcapacity infrastructure needs. And please remember that delayed improvement and maintenance results in greater costs in the long run. Wisconsin has more than 11,000 public water systems to serve residents, which is among the highest in the nation. More than 80% of these are in areas where people do not remain for long periods, while 5% of these systems serve more than 4 million residents. In general, municipalities and water utilities are encountering several natural and man-made water quality issues and must contend with aging water treatment and distribution systems to serve their communities in the future. Lead, bacteria, nitrates, per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS, arsenic, and radium are some of the water quality concerns that have come to light in recent years. It is estimated that $8.6 billion will be needed to address infrastructure deficiencies over the next 2 decades, and this value is expected to grow over time unless immediately addressed. Increased investment in drinking water infrastructure is needed to ensure customers have better access to safe and reliable water supply for future generations. Capacity. At the end of 2018, Wisconsin had nearly 11,600 public water systems serving nearly 4.26 million people. Each public water system is regulated by the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. The DNR defines a public water system as a system that either provides water for human consumption to at least 15 service connections or regularly serves at least 25 people for at least 60 days a year. The chart on this slide provides a breakdown of Wisconsin public water systems and populations served. Although there is a great number of transient non-community water systems, these are still regulated by the DNR for quality and safety. 2/3 of the population, more than 99% of the public water systems in Wisconsin, obtain drinking water from groundwater pumped from wells. 56 public water systems use surface water from Wisconsin lakes. This group includes some of the largest municipalities such as Milwaukee and Green Bay. In general, drinking water capacity in Wisconsin is adequate, with plentiful access to groundwater aquifers and surface water supply such as Lake Winnebago, Lake Michigan, and Lake Superior. However, overpumpage in the Central Sands area in the middle of Wisconsin is potentially causing a decrease in groundwater and lake levels and an increase in groundwater contaminants. Evaluation of lake level effects is currently being performed under the 2017 Act 10. In addition to being regulated by the DNR, some drinking water utilities are also regulated by the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin, or PSC. The PSC's Division of Water Regulation and Analysis oversees 1 investor-owned, 2 small private, and 574 municipal utilities. The PSC's main responsibilities are to establish water utility rates and service standards, review and approve construction projects, review utility organizational transactions, investigate customer complaints, promote utility effectiveness and viability, and manage utility data and information. The PSC requires these water utilities to file an annual report that documents financial and operational information such as water sales and use data, and includes inventories of water system infrastructure. Based on the 2018 PSC annual report data, Wisconsin water utilities produced 186.7 billion gallons of water, but sold 152.2 billion gallons. The approximately 34.5 billion gallons of non-revenue water represents approximately 18.5% of the total amount of water produced. Utilities estimate that approximately 26.6 billion gallons, or 14.2% of the total amount produced, were lost due to water leakages. Although difficult to quantify, the cost of this wasted water is on the order of tens of millions of dollars in pumping and treatment costs, resulting in inflated water rates for customers. Condition. The age of the 20,100 miles of water main within Wisconsin spans a wide range. As reported at the end of 2018, 1.3% of the mains were installed before 1900. 12.6% between 1901 and 1940, 23.1% between 1941 and 1970, 39% between 1971 and 2000, and 24% after 2001. Between 2008 and 2018, approximately 1,028 miles of new pipe were added to municipal water systems. During that same period, an average of 0.5% of mains were retired each year, with 140 miles, or 0.6% of the total length of mains being retired in 2018. A vast majority of the cast iron water mains installed before 1970 will soon, or have already, reached the end of its useful life and will require replacement or rehabilitation. Operations and maintenance and funding. Wisconsin is one of only a few states where all municipal water rates and service standards are established by a state agency, in this case, the Public Service Commission. One of the PSC's primary goals is to help ensure that water utilities have sufficient financial capability to provide public health and safety to customers at just and reasonable rates. In addition, PSC monitors utilities' financial sufficiency. If a water utility decides to raise its water rates, review and approval through the PSC is required. According to the PSC Wisconsin Water Rates Dashboard Tool, and based on November 2019 water rates, the median monthly drinking water bill for a residential customer that uses 4,000 gallons is $35.05, which includes a fire protection charge. When compared to ASCE's 2017 infrastructure report cards, this value lands in the middle of the average monthly water bill range of the nation's 50 largest cities. A Chicago Tribune article from October 2017 compares water rates of Wisconsin and Illinois utilities that both draw from Lake Michigan. The article states that water bills in Wisconsin communities that withdraw or purchase Lake Michigan water are more consistent than those in Illinois, and the Wisconsin bills are generally much lower as well. Because of this arrangement, which has been in effect since 1907 when the PSC was created, most water utilities in Wisconsin are in relatively good position to remain financially viable. However, ongoing committed capital improvement funding for many water utilities is still lacking, as evidenced by the average water main replacement cycle of 200 years. With limited local government resources to go around, prioritizing spending on buried infrastructure is now far more complicated than simply replacing the main when the overlying roadway gets replaced. Water utilities should be performing a risk-based infrastructure assessment or asset management that includes a capital improvement plan that incorporates planned water main replacement to support typical useful lifespans. Utilities should also evaluate the best options for incorporating the cost of an ongoing long-term replacement program into their rate structures. Several communities across Wisconsin have integrated long-term main replacement costs into their water tariffs using an expense depreciation mechanism to cash fund annual water main replacements. This relatively new funding mechanism allows the utilities to pay for main replacement without bonding or borrowing funds, thereby reducing costs in the long run by avoiding interest on debt. To supplement retained earnings from revenue generated by utility customers, many utilities utilize the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources Safe Drinking Water Loan Program, which combines state funds with capitalization grants from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and Drinking Water State Revolving Funds. The Safe Drinking Water Loan Program offers fixed rates, subsidized or low-interest loans, and grants, principal forgiveness. In recent years, there have been more loan funds available than requested. However, this is not the case every year. Use of safe drinking water loan program funds comes with certain regulatory requirements, such as disadvantaged business enterprise, women and minority participation, Davis-Bacon or federal wage rates, monthly reporting, and use of American iron and steel materials, which may deter some utilities from using this program. Future needs. The 2015 U.S. EPA Drinking Water Infrastructure Needs Survey and Assessment identified nearly $8.6 billion in total Wisconsin project costs needed between January 1, 2015 and December 31, 2034 to address infrastructure deficiencies. The results of this needs survey form the basis for allotting drinking water state revolving fund funds to state agencies. Wisconsin costs have been increasing. In 2007, the total need was $7.8 billion, and in 2011, it was $8 billion. It should be noted these costs include only drinking water state revolving fund eligible projects and do not include projects related primarily to meet the needs associated with population growth or fire protection. Following national trends, while Wisconsin population continues to increase, water use is declining because of more efficient plumbing fixtures, public awareness of conservation, and industrial adoption of water recycling technology and other efficient processes. While declining sales can help defer, reduce, and/or eliminate the need to make costly investments in infrastructure in the long run, in the short run, reduced revenues can pose a problem for municipal systems, as many utility expenses are fixed. As a result, lower per capita water use may result in water rate increases. Public safety. During 2018, 99.1% of public water systems in Wisconsin met all health-based maximum contaminant level standards for contaminants regulated under the Safe Drinking Water Act. When an MCL occurs, the DNR works with public water systems to help correct the issue and return the system to compliance as soon as possible. Of the 101 systems that experienced an MCL violation, the most common contaminants present were bacteria, nitrate or nitrite, arsenic, and radium. According to a 2018 legislative report from the state's Groundwater Coordinating Council, nitrate is Wisconsin's most widespread groundwater contaminant and is increasing in extent and severity. One of the most significant issues facing Wisconsin is the presence of lead in drinking water, which is mostly caused by lead water service lines. Lead can have severe effects on human health, such as impaired brain development in infants and children and damage to the nervous system and kidneys in adults. In 2018, there were 22 public water systems that exceeded the lead action level of 15 parts per billion. Additionally, according to the Wisconsin Department of Health Services, the state ranks among the top 10 states for a percentage of children to have lead poisoning. At this time, there are proposed revisions to the national US EPA lead and copper rule. These revisions include mandatory full lead service line replacement. However, the proposals do not include a funding mechanism which will likely hinder progress. To effectively remove lead from a water system, utilities will need proper levels of funding, particularly for the customer or private-owned portion of the lead service line. However, Wisconsin and Milwaukee recently received news from the US EPA there will be a federal plan to replace Milwaukee's 70,000 lead service lines. Great news for the health of the community. In early 2020, Wisconsin began the process of permanent rulemaking for establishing standards for PFAS in drinking water after several communities reported levels of PFAS in its drinking water in 2018. PFAS are a group of human-made chemicals used for decades in numerous products, including nonstick cookware, fast food wrappers, stain-resistant sprays, and certain types of firefighting foam. Adverse health effects include thyroid disease, low birth rates, and cancer. Resilience and innovation. The integrity of a water system and safety of consumers' drinking water can be threatened by a myriad of factors, including aging infrastructure, malicious acts, accidental or non-point source pollution, extreme weather, poor financial management, lack of monitoring practices, and cybersecurity threats. Proper planning, including conservation and utility efficiency, is needed to make sure that utilities can meet future demands. The U.S. EPA recognized this issue, and on October 23, 2018, America's Water Infrastructure Act was signed into law. It requires drinking water systems serving more than 3,300 people to develop or update risk assessments and emergency response plans. Utilities must comply with these requirements by the end of 2021 and must provide a certified letter to the EPA. As part of the PSC required annual reports, utilities are required to submit information regarding non-revenue water as defined by the American Water Works Association, or AWWA. Although utilities are not required to complete a full water audit each year, this level of audit provides a useful tool to help identify cost-effective intervention measures for reducing water loss and optimizing revenue capture. Utilities should adopt best practices as outlined within AWWA M36 water audits and loss control programs and complete a full audit using the AWWA free water audit software. If appropriate, leak detection technologies should be utilized by utilities to locate water mains and breaks. As indicated previously, risk-based infrastructure planning is one example of innovation in asset management. Implementation of advanced metering infrastructure is another example of innovation to lower labor costs, reduce overall water usage, and optimize revenue capture, provided a utility is organized and equipped to deliver these potential benefits. Lastly, utilities should perform cost-benefit analyses on critical water systems to determine if innovative pipe rehabilitation procedures, such as cured-in-place pipe, spray-in-place pipe, or slip lining could be reasonable, cost-effective alternatives to complete main replacement. The Wisconsin section makes the following recommendations to raise the grade for drinking water. Encourage, incentivize, or require water utilities to develop risk-based pipeline prioritization and asset management programs. Ensure that water rates cover the full cost of service, including O&M and long-term replacement needs. Recommend that utilities evaluate cash funding annual water main replacements using an expense depreciation mechanism. Expand and strengthen the Safe Drinking Water Loan Program. Increase principal forgiveness for private lead service funding and opportunities, and streamline or reduce federal requirements to encourage participations. Increase and expand funding for replacement of lead services. Encourage utilities to investigate water conservation and efficiency measures, including implementing uniform or increasing block rate structures and performing full water audits. Adopt innovative technologies to improve maintenance, reduce water loss, enhance productivity, and reduce life cycle costs. As you can see, Wisconsin's drinking water still needs attention. However, you are now equipped to speak on the issues regarding drinking water. For access to the complete Wisconsin 2020 Infrastructure Report Card, please visit infrastructurereportcard.org/Wisconsin as shown on this slide. I would also like to emphasize it is important to view infrastructure holistically in addition to each infrastructure category. As an example, greater use of efficient processes in the use of drinking water results in a lower volume of water being used and less wastewater needing to be treated at wastewater treatment plants. This leaves more water for everyone in the future and increases the efficiency and useful life of water and wastewater facilities. I would like to give special thanks to Justin Bilskemper, the ASCE Wisconsin section member who led the research and prepared the drinking water category report for the report card. Again, thank you for your time and attention. Please feel free to ask questions on this at the conclusion of the upcoming panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl, for that really informative presentation. And again, we apologize for the volume issues. Next slide, please. The wastewater category of the 2020 Wisconsin report card also received a C-, indicating a grade between mediocre, which requires attention, and poor, meaning at risk. Please allow me to introduce Jennifer Hurlibus, the lead author of the wastewater chapter of the 2020 Wisconsin report card. Next slide, please. Jennifer Hurlibus is the collection system engineer for the Madison Metropolitan Sewerage District, where she is responsible for the overall management of the collection system, including a focus on longer-term programs and initiatives. With 16 years in consulting and 5 years in the public sector, Jennifer has experience in collection system evaluations, hydraulic modeling design, and construction of sanitary sewer and pumping stations. Jennifer was the construction project manager for the Pumping Station 15 rehabilitation, which earned Institute for Sustainable Infrastructure Envision Gold and EPA Pisces Awards. She was the lead author of the wastewater chapter for the ASCE 2020 Wisconsin report card. She holds a BS in geological engineering and a BS in geology, geophysics from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Let's welcome Jennifer Hurlibus. Next slide, please.
Oh, thank you, Anne. We can jump into the next slide. Next slide, please. As mentioned, the wastewater received a C- grade, indicating that infrastructure is between mediocre, where it requires attention, and poor at risk. Wisconsin's municipal wastewater utilities are facing challenges due to aging infrastructure, growth, and new wastewater discharge limits. While federal grants and financing mechanisms are important, most of Wisconsin's funding for wastewater infrastructure comes from sewer user fees. The estimated future needs for municipal wastewater infrastructure maintenance and upgrades for Wisconsin total $6.3 billion. Next slide. Many of municipal wastewater treatment plants were constructed or upgraded between the mid-1970s and the late 1980s, when the federal government provided 55% grant funding for treatment plant projects. While Wisconsin demonstrates a proactive approach to facility planning by assigning wastewater treatment plants a typical design life of 20 years, many of the state's wastewater infrastructure systems are 30 to 40 years old and need to be replaced or rehabilitated. But wastewater infrastructure is not only the treatment plants. As this figure shows, most sanitary collection sewers are beyond their expected design life and in need of replacement or rehabilitation. The older sewer systems are susceptible to inflow and infiltration, or II, such as rain and or groundwater that can seep into the system and inundate the capacity, causing backups, sanitary sewer overflows, and wastewater bypasses at treatment plants. From 2015 through 2018, there were 735 reported wastewater overflow events. Next slide. Approximately 25% of Wisconsin residents do not have access to wastewater treatment plants, but mainly rely on on-site systems, such as the septic system. According to the Wisconsin Department of Safety and Professional Services, Wisconsin has 756,000 septic systems inventoried. The state has no way of tracking failing systems. There has been significant attention in the last few years to areas in the eastern part of the state, particularly in the Niagara Escarpment area, where they have shallow and fractured bedrock. Kewaunee County, located within this escarpment, has over 5,300 septic systems. A study by Kewaunee County found that 22% of wells sampled tested positive for microorganisms with a human origin due to poor performance of the on-site systems. Due to the rural nature of this area, the cost to provide wastewater collection and treatment is disproportionately high. Next slide. The cost of sewer service is disproportional among Wisconsin communities. The highest sewer rates occur in communities that range from 1,000 to 2,000 people. Communities of this size represent the majority of the sewered communities in Wisconsin. So due to the economies of scale, costs trend downward for each household as the population being served by the wastewater treatment plant increases. Converting the cost in dollars to percent increase in sewer user charges, the average annual rate of increase was between 4.1 to 5.2% statewide between 1996 to 2019. Next slide. Wisconsin funds wastewater infrastructure through local user fees, federal grants, and financing mechanisms. However, the amount of federal funding, I should say more grant funding where it's not loans, has significantly decreased since the 1970s. According to the Water Alliance, in 1977, the federal government provided 63% of capital spending for water and wastewater systems. Today, that amount is only 9%. Next slide. While federal grants and financing mechanisms are important, most of Wisconsin's funding for wastewater infrastructure comes from sewer user fees. Statewide average sewer rates have continued to increase at a rate of 4.8% per year from 1996 to 2018, a higher value than the national average of 3.9%. Sewer rates continue to climb. Rate increases were an average statewide increase between 6 to 7% in 2019. Phosphorus compliance schedules and related upgrades were identified as the main drivers for the increasing rates. Next slide. Phosphorus has been the most expensive component of wastewater to treat. With more stringent phosphorus limits being placed on wastewater treatment plants to meet water quality standards, the cost per pound will continue to increase. In addition, a matter of increasing importance to public health and wastewater operations is the challenge of previously undiscovered microconstituents, such as PFAS. As mentioned in the previous presentation, PFAS are a class of human-made, highly fluorinated chemicals that have been manufactured and used in industrial and consumer products worldwide since the 1950s. Wisconsin DNR has organized a group to specifically address concerns related to PFAS and update groundwater standards. Wastewater facilities are being asked to begin testing for PFAS, and future regulatory requirements are expected. Significant investment in research for new treatment technologies and disposal techniques will be required. Public education and outreach will continue to be needed to address the treatment and public health concerns with microconstituents. Next slide. So the report card included recommendations for raising the grade for wastewater infrastructure in Wisconsin. Permit holders may incur significant capital and operating expenses to achieve the water quality-based effluent criteria for phosphorus and microconstituents, which are at the practical limits of current technology. Planning is necessary for the physical facilities and financial needs for achieving these limits. The potential impacts of climate change that may impact collection systems such that future capacity will be more difficult to predict and costly to address. Ongoing monitoring and planning are required to maintain or achieve sustainable collection systems. The impacts and costs of microconstituents such as PFAS are currently unknown. Advocacy efforts should focus on national standards, source reduction efforts, funding for research on new technology, and phased implementation to reduce the financial burden on wastewater treatment facilities and ratepayers. Innovative approaches and regional solutions for meeting permit compliance should be encouraged and supported. And finally, support efforts for public education outreach on the value of water and wastewater services and provide incentives for source reduction. Utility rates should cover the full cost of service, including operation, maintenance, and capital needs. Next slide. Thank you for this opportunity to share the wastewater chapter with from the Wisconsin 2020 Infrastructure Report Card. And I'll be happy to answer any questions at the end of the panel discussion.
Thank you so much, Jennifer Hurlibus, for an interesting and informative presentation. Next slide, please. Thank you, Carl, Sutter, and Jennifer Hurlibus for informative presentations on drinking water and wastewater. These presentations and the report card chapters that you and Justin Bilskemper wrote help us better understand the current condition of Wisconsin's drinking water and wastewater. After hearing from our panel, we welcome your participation in the conversation about how to raise grades for drinking water and wastewater. Now we transition to our panel. Our first panel member is Karen Detmer, the Superintendent of Milwaukee Water Works. Next slide, please. As Superintendent, Karen Detmer oversees all aspects of the largest public utility operation in Wisconsin. She leads a team of over 350 professionals with an annual budget exceeding $100 million. Annual revenues of $95 million support assets of $645 million. The utility treats and supplies over 28.9 billion gallons of water annually to cover 860,000 people in 16 communities in Milwaukee, Ozaukee, and Waukesha counties. A licensed professional engineer in the state of Wisconsin, Karen serves on the American Water Works Association's Water Utility Council. She also serves on the board of directors of the Water Council and Menominee Valley Partners. Through a partnership with the U.S. Water Alliance, Karen led Milwaukee Water Works through a collaborative effort to create an equitable water future Milwaukee, a roadmap to build an equitable, inclusive, and diverse water workforce. Let's welcome Karen Detmer. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Ann, and thank you everyone for joining us. So, I mean, such interesting comments from Carl about drinking water. And Milwaukee Water Works is a drinking water utility. We work very closely with Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District, who is the wastewater side. And depending on your locale and your level of involvement, you may have different notions about what water infrastructure actually is. The majority of public conversations on drinking water have been largely focused on contaminants, whether it's lead service lines, cyanobacteria, also known as blue-green algae, perfluorinated compounds, or whatever else may be coming next. Perhaps your knowledge of water infrastructure is solely focused on the water main break that occurred in your neighborhood recently. Whatever your level of focus, it's amazing that you're here today to listen to this conversation and expand that knowledge. Largely, we don't think about water infrastructure until it has reached a breaking point or a failure. And that is a disservice to the discussion of how critical, safe, and reliable drinking water is to our public safety and health. When the fire department uses hydrants to extinguish a fire, we all think to thank the fire department employees for reacting so quickly. But we don't think about pumping station operators and water distribution repair workers that are working behind the scenes and up until that point to ensure those hydrants are available and in use. At Milwaukee Water Works, we strongly focus on emergency management, but we also need to focus on replacing water mains to reduce the need for emergency repairs. We need to ensure our water treatment plants are maintained and improved to ensure contaminants like lead, bacteria, and any other emerging contaminants are removed or don't have the opportunity to contaminate the water. We are a publicly owned utility. As Carl discussed, the PSC sets the water rates to ensure the drinking water utilities are financially sustainable. Water rates fund our daily operations as well as our capital improvements, and we put significant effort into working with the PSC to balance public safety and health with affordability. The comparison to Illinois is a tough one, I think, for many of us, right? That's certainly something we can brag about. We pride ourselves on doing more with less. We love a good deal in Wisconsin, and our drinking water is a great deal until it's not. That's why involvement in discussions like this are so important. And I'm grateful to the League of Women Voters and ASCE in hosting this discussion, but I'm also grateful to all of the attendees in taking the initiative to be part of the conversation and how we can get that C- to an A. Thanks, Ann. Look forward to the questions.
Thank you so much, Karen, for your very informative presentation. Our next panelist is Steve Elmore, Bureau Director for the Division of Environmental Management, Drinking Water and Groundwater at the Wisconsin DNR. Next slide, please. Steve Elmore is the Director of the DNR Drinking Water and Groundwater Program, overseeing the delivery of safe drinking water throughout Wisconsin. Steve has worked at the DNR for 19 years in the areas of drinking water, groundwater, and water conservation. He has served on the board of directors for the Association of State Drinking Water Administrators. He has a bachelor's degree in geological engineering from Purdue University. Let's welcome Steve Elmore.
Thanks so much, Ann. Glad to be here to be a part of this great discussion today. A few things I want to highlight that the Department of Natural Resources does in relation to infrastructure and protecting drinking water. Two main areas I want to focus on. One is funding, funding infrastructure projects, and the other is our regulatory oversight of public drinking water systems. So in terms of funding, we already heard a little bit about that here today. Wisconsin does have a safe drinking water loan program, providing loans, low interest loans, and sometimes what we call principal forgiveness, which is like a grant to utilities to make infrastructure improvements. And as stated here earlier, the amount we have available is not adequate to meet the needs. There are currently $8.6 billion in needs for infrastructure upgrades in Wisconsin, of which the total for distribution system needs, which is like the pipes and service lines, that's $5.3 billion in need. I'll note there that that total does not include the need for lead service line replacement, although we are currently working on an update to the needs survey, working with US EPA, and the new amount that comes out of this new needs survey will include lead service line replacement dollar amounts. The other thing I'll note is right now there's the American Rescue Plan Act, the ARPA money that is coming to communities. Some of that can be used for infrastructure improvements. And there is information on the Wisconsin Department of Revenue website about those funds. And there's also some additional money that's slated for water and wastewater infrastructure. We still have not heard from our governor's office how that will be distributed in Wisconsin. It can also be used for information, it can be used for like broadband, intranet upgrades, as well as water and wastewater infrastructure. One issue I want to highlight regarding funding is the capacity to apply for a loan. While we give out many loans every year, there's some of the small utilities that don't really have the management capacity to apply for a loan. These are very small systems in Wisconsin, and that raises also an environmental justice concern for those systems. I will note in that regard, though we do give out a lot of money, we gave out $93 million in loans in 2020. So the other part of our program that I wanted to highlight today is our regulatory oversight of public water systems. We do things like inspections of the system. We do engineering plan review when improvements are made to the system. We also oversee water quality testing and follow up if there are results above safe drinking water standards. Some things I wanted to highlight in that regard, though, is you know, a lot of the infrastructure is buried infrastructure. It's underground, and so even the inspections we do sometimes it's difficult to understand what the quality of those buried infrastructure are. And unfortunately, as was stated earlier by Karen, if it's out of sight, it's out of mind sometimes. And so that is one overall challenge in our work, is understanding just the quality of the infrastructure, the condition of it currently. And with that also, you know, lead pipes in the ground, which we have many of, unfortunately in Wisconsin, the lead service lines, they do work. Lead is a good material for conveying water. It's very robust material that stands up over time. But it does unfortunately release a poison into our drinking water, and so they need to be replaced. With that, we need to coordinate with other local agencies to replace. When you replace a lead service line, you're punching a hole in the street, and coordination needs to happen. And we need a workforce to replace that. We have a big need for replacing those pipes, and we need the people that can do that. As was also stated earlier, you know, a lot of water main pipes, the big pipes in the street, have roughly 100-year lifespan. We really need to replace then at least 1% a year to keep up with the you know, the engineering life of that pipe. So water quality problems, I'll just briefly mention some challenges that we have, namely nitrates, PFAS, and lead. Nitrates, you know, often can be a challenge out in rural areas, and we really need to use a source water protection approach. What we do on the landscape, we need to be mindful of that so that we don't contaminate our groundwater and therefore our drinking water. PFAS, we are working on some new standards for PFAS in drinking water. And so we'd like to set those standards so that we can remove PFAS from our drinking water. Just lastly, you know, I'll mention that there are some things in terms of maintaining infrastructure, like making sure the pipes are clean in our communities, doing things like flushing and maintaining those pipes so that things like iron and manganese don't build up in those pieces of infrastructure, and also reduce the biofilm growth. And as was stated by Karen Detmer, broken pipes cause problems, loss of pressure. It's certainly an inconvenience for people, and it can cause bacteria to enter the system and cause health problems. So I'll stop there and look forward to the questions and as part of the discussion here afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen Elmore, for your informative and interesting remarks. Next, we will hear from Chance Green, Utility Manager, Water and Wastewater for the City of Ashland. Next slide. Oh, you're already on it. Green is the Utilities Manager for the City of Ashland, Wisconsin. He was born and raised in the small town of Amory, Wisconsin. You can see from his bio that this is also where his career in the municipal water and wastewater began, with a summer job in high school. Eventually, he became a licensed operator in water and wastewater for the state of Wisconsin, and in 2014 was promoted to Assistant Director of Public Works for Amory, where he oversaw daily operations regarding water, wastewater, streets, parks, and building maintenance. But his real love was Bayfield County, and in the fall of 2018, the city of Ashland, which is near Bayfield, had an opening, so he made his move north. Having been there almost 3 years, he is proud to call Ashland home. Chance says, please feel free to reach out to him with any questions, concerns, or comments. Let's welcome Chance Green. Next slide, please.
Thank you guys for having me. It's just these pictures here in the slide are just kind of what we're up to up here in the north. We have a lot going on. We've been very proactive. Ashland has a bad reputation, a bad past, overflows into Lake Superior, things like that. It's just not a good look, but poor maintenance and a lot of turnover and things have led to that. In the last 3 years, we've kind of squashed that stuff. We've got a good team put together and we've hit the ground running. In 3 years, we cleaned and televised almost 85% of our sewer system. We've replaced, at the end of this year, we'll have over 100 blocks of sewer main CIPP lined. We've done over 20 blocks of full replacement, sewer replacement. This year, we've replaced over 12 blocks of water main, and we have scheduled 60 lead service laterals to replace as well. So we set our hair on fire and we're being very proactive. A lot of our funding is coming from Safe Water Drinking Act. We did receive some LSL grant money. I believe now we've had that in place for about 6 years. So those are some great resources to remove lead laterals. And it's fairly simple, little paperwork involved, but we've had a good, I guess you could say we've had a good turnout. People they want to use it. It's free to the homeowner. It's a great resource to have. And it's helping get all the lead out of our system. Aside from that, we've been pursuing other grants and other things like that in regards to water and sewer main replacement. CIP lining is a big thing and something we want to pursue up here. We have a huge I&I issue. A lot of our sewer main was put in pre-1900, and about 20 of our 60 miles of water main is pre-1900. So we have a lot of pipe to replace. We've noticed that in our studies, we've put together a lot of studies that show anything prior, of course, which makes sense. Anything prior to 1920 is breaking on us more than the rest. So our plan over the next 10 years or so is to replace as much of that as we can. And we're doing well so far. Within 3 years, we've got a good plan put together and we've got the ball rolling on that. As for any questions or concerns, I apologize. I might be running a little short. I was a little late to the party. I had a sewer backup earlier, but any question, concerns, or comments, please feel free to reach out to me. And what the City of Ashland's doing, I'm glad I'm here to help, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Jans, for your interesting presentation. Let's meet our next panelist, Shakita McElroy, the parent lead for the Coalition on Lead Emergency, or COLE. Next slide, please. Shakita has been organizing for 10 plus years to help create better working conditions for low-wage workers. She has marched with them and supported correcting Latino injustice and the bad working conditions for healthcare workers. Most recently, she has supported parents like herself with children suffering from the effects of lead poisoning. SHI has a goal to educate and help as many parents as possible to get the lead out of their lives, homes, and children, as well as to hold our elected officials and government officials accountable. She has been COLE's, that's Coalition on Lead Emergencies, parent lead for 5 months and already has seen what can happen when people power comes together for positive change. As she continues to strive for better, she will always remember the stories of the people and how together, si se puede, or yes, we can. Let's welcome Shai McElroy. Next slide, please.
Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. I have been, like the bio says, with COLE for 5 months. And a little backstory about me, I have 4 children, and my oldest son since birth had lead exposure. So he had high lead levels to me of 5 milligrams per deciliter. And that woke me up to things that I did not know then that I know now. So that's been my main objective, and my main goal is to educate other parents, educate our community, educate everyone about the things about lead that they don't know about. And so the number one thing that I learned when I first came into coal is the key rule to lead. And it's stuck with me and will stick with me for the rest of my life. And it's the first thing that I tell all parents, and that is there is no safe lead level. Every day I feel the effects, my son feel the effects of that statement. And though to our government officials, he had a low lead level, he still feel those effects with cognitive delays, educational delays that he have to deal with now, ADHD, so many things, and the list goes on. And I just want to prevent other parents from having to either go through that or catch the problems, because not a lot of children get tested, which is surprising, but not a lot of children get tested and don't know that they have been lead poisoned, and the effects of their lives is due to lead poisoning. So that's what drew me to coal. And throughout my time with coal, I love that our vision is that we want a Milwaukee, Wisconsin, to live in an environment where all known sources of lead poison is eliminated. And so that brings us to our mission. And our mission is definitely to create a sustainable lead safe environment in Milwaukee by engaging in a broad range of community partners. And so that is where our partners come into play. And our coal's partners is a collective of nonprofit organizations, environmentalists, educators, doctors, community members, and civic activists, as well as our parents. So if you can see on the slide, we definitely want parents to join coal, because coal is made up of parents like myself. Coal is parent-led. These are issues that I didn't know. I talk to parents all the time, and I didn't know that all of our stories are the same. We all have similar struggles, similar pains, similar things that we're going through in our communities due to our children's exposure to lead. A little history about coal. Coal has successfully advocated for $3.55 million to be budgeted to the health department to bring the serviceable level of lead in children's blood from 20 micrograms per deciliter to 5 micrograms per deciliter. So that is something that's really huge. So, I mean, basically what that means is that if your children are showing up with lead levels, which there's no safe lead level, but if they're showing up with lead levels of 5 micrograms per deciliter, they're getting the attention and the awareness that they need to get that problem eradicated and get lead out of their home. Rather than before, it was like you had to wait till your children are totally damaged by lead exposure to get help. So coal has also raised awareness for women who are pregnant and has successfully advocated for $240,000 to be used for a birthing moms pilot project. So 2,400 pregnant moms in the zip codes of 53204, 53206, 53208, and 53210 to get lead prevention education and lead filtering pictures. So that's big. Like, if I had these resources when I had my son, who's 14 now, if I had the education and the protection for him, I think that things would have went a little bit different. And I'd be the first to raise my hand and say, that's okay. My son can be the example of what can happen if our children are exposed to lead. That's okay, because we're here now. But that's not going to stop us from telling our story. That's not going to stop us from pushing parents to be educated, be better safe, and holding our elected officials responsible and holding them accountable for the things that they promise us that they're going to do. And on top of that, working together. That's the most important part. And I think that's the biggest thing that coal stands for and proven to stand for, that working together gets things done. So just like Ann said, I believe in the phrase, si se puedes, and that's yes, we can. So I'll take the questions and stuff after the rest of the panelists are through. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shai, for your presentation on this important topic. Next, please allow me to introduce Denise Schmidt, Administrator of the Division of Water Utility Regulation and Analysis for the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry, we're at it already. Denise Schmidt has over 30 years of experience in the utility industry and has worked at the Public Service Commission since 2012. In her current role as the administrator of the Division of Water Utility Regulation and Analysis, Denise advises the Commission on water utility matters and coordinates the work of engineers, auditors, and rate and policy analysts to support regulatory oversight of just under 580 public drinking water utilities. She has served as a trustee on the board of the Wisconsin section of the American Water Works Association and chair of the Alliance for Water Efficiency Education and Outreach Committee, and is a current board supervisor and past Plan Commission chair in the town of Middleton. Denise holds a bachelor's degree in environmental health science from Purdue University and a master's degree in public policy from Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government. Let's welcome Denise Schmidt. Next slide, please.
Well, thank you everyone for the chance to be part of this dedicated group of panelists. I really feel privileged in that regard. I chose this slide for my presentation because I feel very connected to the PSC's mission, and I'm proud. Carl mentioned how our rates compare with neighboring Illinois and large city rates nationally. But I think Karen mentioned the balance that we really always try to strike, and that is affordable service isn't really useful service if it is not safe, reliable, affordable, and environmentally responsible. The public health nature of what public water utilities provide is of paramount importance to us. So just a little bit about what the PSC is. It's not a super familiar agency to most people. We are an independent agency that makes decisions on drinking water utility rates and construction projects, and also led service line replacement financial assistance programs. Our processes are set up to provide transparency in the rate making and construction processes, and also to involve as many different voices as possible. In our division, I am the decision maker on the vast majority of the cases, and I will tell you that I read every comment that is filed in those cases before I make a decision on them. So your voice is very important in our process. We were the first state in the nation to regulate public utilities from an economic standpoint. I think our 100th anniversary was in 2007. And we're also one of very few states to provide economic oversight of municipal drinking water utilities. And the point being that their public water utilities, regardless of ownership status, are monopolies. And so to make sure that service standards and rates are just and reasonable takes some oversight, and that our state has recognized that an independent commission was the best way to do that. We partner very closely on that safety, reliability, and environmental responsibility piece of the equation with our colleagues at the DNR. And while DNR is ensuring utilities meet the Safe Drinking Water Act requirements and utilities maintain technical, managerial, and financial capacity, we help make sure that that financial capacity is in place at a reasonable rate to provide that safe, reliable service. Our division consists of engineers, auditors, rate analysts. We have a data scientist intern right now and a policy advisor as well. And just kind of some fun facts about public drinking water utilities in our state. A little over half of them, about 53%, report directly to a city or village council, while about 47% report to a district or utility commission. This is my way of telling you, got involved at the local level. A lot of decisions around construction projects and the level of service and your rates are happening at the local level. And we know in working with these public utilities that they would like to hear from you too. Just as looking at these rates here, as an economic regulator, what we're tasked with doing is making sure a particular project is in the public interest. And that's where the balance comes in. Is the project efficient? I think I heard Carl mention the word, is a utility making economically optimized investment decisions? public water utilities are an extremely capital intensive industry, one of the most capital intensive industries, whether it's buried infrastructure or all the infrastructure that everybody who went before me has described. There's a price tag on that. And it is indeed borne by the customers or the ratepayers. The decline in federal spend, as Jennifer brought up, has a real impact on ratepayers. It's heartening to think that there may be some federal investment and federal dollars coming down the road to help pay for some of these necessary investments to help mitigate the rate impacts. We know at the PSC the challenges I think that utilities face that have been mentioned here. The need for infrastructure replacement and renewal, but at the same time, what's going on are shifting customer expectations, a graying workforce, an increased competition for skilled employees, and then how, I think the jury is still out on what does it mean to provide affordable rates. The slide here shows, just as in wastewater, there are definitely economies of scale, and that the larger utilities, by and large, are able to provide rates that are lower, just due to being able to spread those high fixed costs over a bigger customer base. So I guess if I were to leave you with one thing, and I guess why I'm here on the panel, is how you pay for it matters. And I'm interested to be part of the conversation and take any questions.
Thank you so much, Denise Schmidt, for your informative presentation. Next slide, please. We want to thank our drinking water and wastewater panel members for the excellent information and perspectives you provided today. Karen Detmer, Superintendent of Milwaukee Waterworks; Stephen Elmore, Bureau Director for the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources; Chance Green, City of Ashland Utility Manager for Water and Wastewater; Shakita McElroy, Coalition on Lead Emergencies Parent Lead; and Denise Schmidt, Administrator of the Division of Water Utility Regulation and Analysis for the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin. Next, we will move on to the Q&A. I know that's what everybody has been waiting for. Next slide, please. Okay. So now, audience, it is your opportunity to ask ASCE authors and panelists your questions. Please use the chat. I know several of you have already done so. To ask your questions, let us know to whom to direct the question. Laura Gentz, Legislative Coordinator and Administrative Assistant for LWVWI, will be monitoring the chat. Please keep questions and comments to no more than 1 minute so all can participate. Thank you very much. And thank you to everyone for a lively discussion. Laura?
Thank you very much, Anne, and all of the presenters for all of your informative presentations so far. I'm looking forward to hearing all of these wonderful questions. The first one comes from Michael Goodman, and he would like to know, what is the source of radium in our water supply?
I can take that one. This is Steve Elmore. So radium is naturally occurring in Wisconsin in the rocks underground in the eastern part of the state. And when we have a well that goes down into those rocks that have radium, the water can leach or erode that radium in the rocks and get it into the water. And so where we have that problem, treatment or blending with another safe source of water from another well, or just the well construction in the first place can help reduce the radium levels. And then the last thing I'll say is just that the city of Waukesha, as you may know, has radium in their wells, and they are working to get water from the city of Milwaukee to remediate their problem.
Laura, I'd also like to add that I believe the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources has a great infographic on how radium gets into the water supply and how it gets into the system. So I suggest that whoever had that go to their website and find that infographic. I believe it's just a 2-page thing, but it's a wonderful resource to use if you're curious about it.
All right, thank you so much for answering that, Steve and Carl. Our next question is also from Michael Goodman. He would like to know, is Cryptosporidium still a hazard?
I can certainly take that one, since Milwaukee is still the largest waterborne illness catastrophe in the United States due to the Cryptosporidium outbreak in the early 90s. And yes, it is still a concern. We regularly monitor for Cryptosporidium and other parasites and bacterias, including Giardia, to make sure that the water is safe for consumption. Milwaukee Water Works has actually put in over $500 million in investment over the last 26 or so years that we've had in ozonation treatment. So we have an added level of disinfection treatment that, as an added bonus, removes taste and odor in ozone treatment. We also use chlorine to disinfect our water, which most water utilities, I believe, use chlorination as the primary disinfectant. And that helps to ensure that if there is any Cryptosporidium, Giardia, any of those parasites that can cause significant illness, they're properly killed and aren't a risk to the drinking water and the public.
Great, thank you so much for answering that question, Karen. Our next question is from Susan Johnson, and I believe this one is to Carl. What is meant by to build consensus on necessary update that you had on your slide?
Okay, I believe that was referencing it says leadership should build consensus. Basically what we're saying there is the people who hold the purse strings need to decide what is going to be done. We can make recommendations, but until someone is going to pay for it, they're just recommendations that we make either orally or on a piece of paper. It comes down, it's really going to be, in most cases, political. They're going, we can provide to them all the information, but until they release the funds for it, nothing will be improved.
Okay, thanks, Carl. The next one is from Janice and Rick Penn. It is, please explain the multiple municipalities who have signed onto a letter asking that the DNR not set standards for PFAS.
I mean, I can address that a little bit. I guess I'm not sure entirely what those municipalities or water utilities are thinking, but from reading those letters, my understanding is there's a concern that the cost to the utility will be greater than the potential benefit, that if they have to test for and remove PFAS from their water, that may be more expensive than the benefit, the public health benefit that will result. And so they want us to look into that more and do studies like US EPA does when they set maximum contaminant levels for on the national scale.
I'm just gonna, if I can, just chime in and get on my soapbox a little bit on this, because we have a captive audience of people that are really interested in making change. And I just want to put the perspective forward that we welcome PFAS regulation. I think it's necessary to ensure that our drinking water is safe and our source water is safe. Where I think most of the drinking water utilities and wastewater utilities are thinking is this should not fall on our ratepayers. This expense should not be the general public's. And I think I saw a comment in the chat related to, vote with your pocketbook. We now know the contaminants that cause, or the products that cause PFAS. But what we don't do in the United States largely is put the chemical companies that are creating these products to task in proving that these are safe chemicals to be creating and to be manufacturing before that occurs. And now we're all left with the bill in making sure that we clean it up. And I think that is a great disservice to the public. And that is, you know, largely where you all come into play in voting for changes that would require the chemical companies to make that change. So that's my environmental activist soapbox that I'll jump off of now and put my water utility leader hat back on. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. That was great information about PFAS and making sure your dollar matters amount. And also, Steve, thank you for your comments on it as well. Our next question is from Joe. Are we monitoring the water usage amounts into and water purity outflows from the Foxconn facilities in Racine County?
I wonder again if Steve might be the person in our group, or perhaps Karen. I don't know.
Yeah, I was quiet here just because we don't have a ton of oversight on that. Let's see, they receive their water from the city of Racine, and they do have a diversion approval, meaning that they can pull water from the Great Lakes Basin because they are just across the divide. Actually, that site itself crosses the Great Lakes Mississippi River divide, and because of that, they have to have approval from our program, my program, the only piece of that though that we track is annually we get a report from them on how much water was brought over to their facility and how much water was returned to the Great Lakes Basin. So we do have that information, but I don't, and that's is found in a report. I can't tell you off the top of my head if it's posted on our website, but we do have that information that we get annually.
And Steve, it's my understanding that it's the Racine wastewater utility also that treats the waste from Foxconn. Is that correct? So they are, they probably have information about what they're treating coming from Foxconn. That's not information we keep in-house either though at the PSC.
Yeah, we don't have anything about the quality of that water, either the water coming over. I mean, we know Racine's water quality test, but not specifically what's coming into the pipes at Foxconn and what's going out quality-wise.
All right, thank you for responding to that question. Our next question is from Michael Goodman. Are there presently any private water bottlers using any Wisconsin municipal water supplies and then reselling it commercially?
Yes. Coca-Cola has a Dasani and Smart Water bottling operation on the northwest side of the city of Milwaukee, and they use Milwaukee water. Also Molson Coors and every other beer facility, brewery and distillery that's in Milwaukee or the surrounding area and in our service area as well.
All right, thank you, Karen. I was unaware of that. The next question is from Joe. Have the coal-fired power plants, WEC specifically, submitted their plans to remediate their wet coal ash ponds handling?
Steve, I was, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I don't know if we have the right people on this this panel to answer that question. I know some people at DNR are engaged in that, but it's not myself. So sorry about that.
And from the PSC perspective, if there were a WEC were to submit a project for that and work that out with the DNR as to how to make it effective, they would likely come through the PSC, but not my division for approval on that project.
Okay, sorry we couldn't answer your question. I'm sure there's information out there though on the DNR's website about things like that. The next question is from Zach. How can we find out what nitrate and nitrite levels are in the source water going into specific drinking water treatment plants?
Well, I can speak for Milwaukee Water Works. We publish all of our water quality data on our website. So that information is readily available. We sample for nitrates, nitrates and nitrites, as well as almost 500 other different potential contaminants. And we make that information available at milwaukee.gov/water. If you just click on the water quality tab, you can see our current and previous reports related to water quality. And that'll take you all the way from the raw water, as we refer to it, or the source water coming out of Lake Michigan, through distribution sampling at the tap through various areas of our service area, excuse me. And then also we have our consumer confidence report, which is a regulatory requirement from the EPA and overseen by the DNR, as well as every other water utility in the state of Wisconsin would be required to put out that consumer confidence report to indicate what levels of certain contaminants that they've sampled for and what has been a positive result, or what has been detected in that water.
I'll just add to what Karen said for statewide perspective. Absolutely, the consumer confidence report is a good tool for finding water quality data. We also have data on our DNR website. If you go to the DNR website and search drinking water quality, we make available all the data that we have available for public water systems. And like Karen said, if you search for raw water data, that's the sort of to look for those results. You'd have to look for all chemical results for nitrate, and then look at just the ones that say raw water, and that will tell you what's coming in before treatment to the system. So what's coming from the wells or from the surface water intakes. Yeah, I'll stop there.
All right, thank you so much. Next question is from Rose. If some faucet water filters remove copper, why are lead pipes being replaced with copper pipes?
Steve, do you want that one too, or do you want me? I mean, like Steve is in the hot seat.
You can start. You can start. Go for it.
So I'll start with my level of understanding, and that is that a filter that removes lead is also certified to remove metals, and certainly we look at and recommend that any child under the age of 6, woman who is pregnant or is breastfeeding or may become pregnant, use an NSF 53 certified. So that's National Science Foundation. 53 is the standard certified to remove lead, but it also removes other other metals. Copper can be an issue. It's not typically an issue to the levels that would be contaminated from plumbing fixtures. But we follow and we are in compliance with the lead and copper rule, because in certain areas where corrosion is an issue, copper can become an issue at a greater concentration if it's getting into the water then, but we're talking about concentrations. As Shai said, there is absolutely no safe level of lead in drinking water or in consumption of any sort. Copper is a little bit different in that we want to get lead down to 0. Copper is much higher standard. I believe it's 1,300 parts per million. The achievable standard set by the EPA for lead is 15 parts per billion. So very different level of contamination and level of standard, but certainly the technology of the filters removes many metals.
Yeah, and I'm not a doctor or a public health official, but yeah, the health effects are different for copper than for lead. As was said, there's no safe level of lead. And for copper, it's more that you will get sick to your stomach if you have too high levels of copper. There is also a very unique syndrome that can happen if you drink high levels of copper over time. Copper tends to be a problem when there's new copper that hasn't had time to develop a scale on it. But it usually will develop even a small amount of scale on it that then protects the water user from the release of copper from the pipe. It's different from lead, and we tend to be, in certain water qualities, concerned about fresh, new copper, but overall, that issue is much smaller than the lead issue that we're currently dealing with.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is from Susan Johnson. Could you tell us about some innovative approaches you would like more municipalities to adopt?
I'll take this one. One of the examples is for phosphorus compliance is the use of adaptive management and looking at a watershed on a regional perspective and looking for source reduction. So if we can keep some of these pollutants out of our water, wastewater supply, I guess, you know, from the beginning, then we don't have to treat it. We don't have to spend money and build capital and more infrastructure in order to do that. So, you know, if we can kind of take care of the sources where they exist in a more cost-effective manner, that is definitely an innovative approach. And DNR has been very open to, you know, working with utilities on some more of those adaptive management or different types of compliance issues. So, you know, because I think there are a lot of things, you know, when we're talking about PFAS, we're talking about infiltration and inflow of phosphorus, chlorides, nitrates, you know, these are not generated necessarily, especially in wastewater. It comes from other sources. So the more that we can do to figure out the best way to do that, and not just have to build infrastructure to convey or treat that, the better.
So I'll jump in as well. Jennifer, you mentioned and showed the economies of scale from larger utilities being able to provide services at a perhaps more affordable rate. One of the innovations, it's probably a little bit of an old school idea, but just partnerships, whether it's on procurement of supplies or sharing operators, sharing staff, all the challenges that utilities are facing right now. It can be tough because I understand there are intermunicipal arguments, right, that may have nothing to do with water, but it's a really good idea to get past those, because I think there are some opportunities there to provide more affordable service and open up the opportunity to perhaps replace more lead pipes faster, or other sort of high priority issues that utility customers have brought to the leadership. So I think partnerships is something that has not been fully explored at all.
Thank you very much. The next question is for Jennifer Hurlibus. Education and engineering changes have reduced Wisconsinites' water usage by an astounding 41% since 2006. What do you see as the top behavioral and/or engineering changes that might ease the impact of groundwater and wastewater overpowering the wastewater collection system during flood events?
great question. That is something that we did point out in the report card, that, you know, potable water usage has significantly decreased, you know, with low flow fixtures and just better, you know, conservation methods, people just being more aware of water being a valuable commodity and trying to use less of it. So one would think wastewater should also go down, right? And yes, on an average day, it's either held steady, even with growth. But, you know, when it rains, we can see increases in wastewater flow, even in a separate system. So, you know, that's that clear either stormwater or groundwater that's getting into the pipes. It's not that more people are taking more showers during a storm event. So, you know, municipalities and utilities, they have been working on, you know, maintaining, fixing their public sanitary sewers and reducing that inflow and infiltration. But studies have shown that more than 50% of that clear water is from private property sources. So I really think that public education and outreach to our private property homeowners or businesses that is really, really needed for kind of that behavioral change on the wastewater side. So one incorrectly installed sump pump can add as much water as an average size swimming pool per day of clear water into a wastewater system. They're not supposed to be connected to the sanitary, but you know, people do that, and then you go and inspect it, and they may have figured out how to disconnect it when it gets inspected and then reconnect it. So, you know, it's really unnecessary and expensive to convey, pump, and treat that excess clear water. And then, you know, the private property sewer laterals, just a pure numbers game. There's more lineal feet of pipe of private sanitary laterals than the local mains and the regional large conveyance system. So, you know, if those have, and a lot of them, most people don't even think about it. They've never been inspected. You have a home that's 70 years old, chances are tree roots or something else has cracked the pipe and you're getting a source of inflow. The only time it gets inspected is when they have a backup and they have a problem. So, you know, they can reduce that infiltration by inspecting the sanitary sewer laterals and then getting them repaired. Now that's an expense most people don't think about. You know, we replace our roof, we know what's going to get replaced. More awareness needs to be made that your sanitary sewer line, which again, out of sight, out of mind, is part of the homeowner's responsibilities. So I think a big challenge is going to be, how can municipalities help private property owners and homeowners with these types of things? Do you have a cost sharing program? Do you have something that goes as a part of a you know, property expense or spread out over several years? So I just, you know, I think that's a big thing that, you know, again, it's the out of sight, out of mind, and creating more awareness for people understanding what their part in the public infrastructure is.
All right, thank you so much, Jennifer. The next question is for Steve Elmore. What is your top priority for infrastructure investment in drinking water across the state? What is needed to make that investment a reality?
Yeah, good question. And my answer would be, I think the top priority should be lead service line replacement. And we really need to get those pipes replaced so that we eliminate the exposure of lead from the drinking water sources. And, you know, a close second is water main replacement. There's a lot of old, outdated water mains that are breaking and causing water quality problems around the state. So that would be my close second funding priority. And so what's needed? Well, you know, I'm hopeful that the federal infrastructure funding plan goes through, and that will provide hopefully a lot of money for lead service line replacement. I'm encouraged to see that as a big part of the conversation right now. So there's that. And, you know, I'll also note, as was mentioned earlier, there is a revision to the lead and copper rule that will help us get a better handle on where lead service lines are and some requirements for replacement in that rule. So that's my funding priority.
Thank you very much. We have another question from Anne, then this one is for Karen Detmer. What investment in drinking water infrastructure will best keep the citizens of Milwaukee safe? And what is needed to make that investment a reality?
Well, I'll certainly piggyback off of Steve's response. You know, we need money to pay for lead service line replacements, and we need that federal infrastructure bill to fund full replacements for the private property side as well as the public and utility owned property side, because in Wisconsin, or excuse me, in Milwaukee right now, we have a program where we are tackling the biggest risks. So childcare facilities are mandated to have a full lead service line replacement, and that is free of charge to the property owner for that particular facility, whether they rent or lease the property or if they own the property themselves. The city of Milwaukee pays and funds the private side, the privately owned portion of that through general fund. The utility always pays for the replacement of the utility owned portion between the curb stop and the water main. And again, I think it's important for people to understand though, that the utility owned portion is funded by the ratepayers. So this isn't, you know, this is something that we're all paying for. And having that federal infrastructure bill to offset that to Milwaukeeans, to Wisconsinites, I think is a great thing, because we're paying federal taxes as well, right? We want to see that money going to infrastructure improvements. And it's really a small portion right now of what is being proposed in that infrastructure bill, and isn't even getting media. You hear about roads and bridges, and that's the large funding sources. But what we're not hearing about is how much money is actually going to water infrastructure. And it's discouraging to see how that's been whittled down. So we're working actively with our national partners to contact our senators right now and our representatives in the US Congress to make sure that does not get whittled down any further, and that funding comes to municipalities, comes, you know, through the state, through Steve's department, to us as grant funding, because we want to make sure that is not passed along to the property owners. We want to make sure that we have the tools to make it free for everyone so that we can get out there and get it done as quickly as possible, because there are property owners that don't understand the value. And if they have to pay anything to have that lead service line replaced, they are sometimes not interested in moving that forward. And of course, because of our city ordinance mandating a full replacement in certain circumstances, we require them to do so, but it's not easy, and it increases our programmatic costs as well. For the other side of that, so I mentioned childcare facilities and schools. On top of that, we also mandate a full replacement if there is any leak or failure in the lead service line, or if there's a planned project. So right now our planned projects include water main replacement projects where we have to cut that service line and reconnect it to a water main. We mandate a full replacement, and we have a cost share for 1 to 4 family residential properties to the tune of limiting their costs to $1,843. It's an odd number because it's adjusted every year based on a construction index, but that is the cost that the private property owners for 1 to 4 family residential properties are limited to if they're part of a planned project or an emergency leak or failure, and mandated to do a full service line replacement. The other type of planned projects we do is paving projects. And so, you know, we're trying to systematically go through and pick where we know that there could be an increase of lead and water at the tap due to a construction project, or if there's just an increased risk to the occupants of that property, a child care facility or school. But we would absolutely love to see a huge influx of money to come through the state from the federal government, so that we can ramp up that replacement rate and get those lead service lines out of the ground. I won't take up too much more time because I know we're getting short and I can be pretty lengthy in my discussions, but I also, want to make sure that people understand lead is not the only contaminant. It certainly is a worthy topic of discussion, and we need to keep that topic of discussion going. But we are regularly treating for Cryptosporidium parasites that were mentioned, bacteria that can get into the drinking water, all that stuff that prevents you from just going to Lake Michigan and grabbing a drink out of it. We are treating for all of that. So I just want to also reiterate the importance of investing in the infrastructure that's in our water treatment plants, as well as our water main replacement is so critical to ensuring that that water is safe.
Thank you so much, Karen. Speaking of the federal infrastructure funding, what can we do to ensure that our individual communities compete successfully for new federal funding for our infrastructure? Dorothy Sky asks.
Call your senators, call your congresspersons, vote. I've got, if anyone's looking for phone numbers, I've got them on speed dial. Please let them know that we absolutely need that funding. And they need to hear from you, right? I mean, that's where the impact will come, if it's coming from the voters.
And I think, Karen, just to echo what you said earlier, to make sure that you're letting them know how important drinking water is. I mean, it's one of the great human accomplishments ever. Drinking water treatment has advanced our longevity more than many medical procedures. So as far as the ARPA funds are concerned, there are funds that have been targeted towards communities. And for many communities right now, depending on where you live, they've just started the conversation about how to use those funds. I know there's still some guidance waiting to come from Treasury about how to spend it, but I think, it's pretty clear that there are targeted funds for water, whether it's drinking water or wastewater, and please let your local officials know that that's where you would like to see some of those dollars directed as well. I'm hearing a little bit about like water getting left out of sort of the local conversation as well.
All right, thank you all so much for that answer. I'm going to have this be the last question so that we can get to our final call to action as well. This question is for Karen, Detmer, or others. Has the aquifer been impacted by wholesale customers and/or climate change?
So I can start this, and then I'm sure, Steve, you'll have some to add. But so when we talk about aquifers, we're largely talking about groundwater, source water that's underground. In Milwaukee, we have Lake Michigan, and we refer to that as a surface water. So we don't necessarily draw water down from aquifers, but I can say that yes, climate change has absolutely affected Lake Michigan. We've seen increased levels. I think some of the increase in levels are cyclical, and that those levels in Lake Michigan will go down, and they have gone down since last year. But we're also seeing an increase in storms. And when those storms occur, that is increasing the flow, the size of the waves in Lake Michigan. It's increasing the strain on our pumps and pulling that water out of Lake Michigan. So there are some, pretty drastic infrastructure improvements that we may be faced to make as far as our retaining wall and our Linwood water treatment plant that's on the shore of Lake Michigan, in the pump structure and the facilities that pull that water out. So absolutely, that is a concern related to the wholesale customer impact. When, Steve mentioned earlier that Milwaukee Water Works will be supplying the city of Waukesha with water, and they are outside of that Great Lakes basin that was on my slide that showed that actual dividing line, where every drop of water that falls west of that basin will go to the Mississippi River, not back to Lake Michigan. But the DNR and the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Seaways Cities initiatives and other collaborations through the United States and Canada, ensuring that the source water of the Great Lakes is protected, are creating this this requirement for Waukesha to return every single drop of water that they take out of Lake Michigan that we pump to them. It is highly, highly metered with very, very specific metering technology that shows what that exact consumption and flow is. And they will be forced to return every single drop back to that Great Lakes basin.
I can just do a brief addition to that too. What we're going to see and what we have been seeing with climate change is more extreme weather events. That's the element that's going to affect our water systems and our aquifers moving forward. And so we've seen, for instance, now an increase in the level of groundwater in recent years due to, like, maybe the last 3 years, we've had above average precipitation and large rainfall events that then add extra water to the ground and raise that overall level of groundwater. But not so long ago, in 2012, we had a drought that caused our water systems to have to pump extra water because people wanted to water their lawns. And during that event, there was the groundwater levels did go down some, but it was really sort of 1 year, and more regular rainfall in subsequent years brought that groundwater table back up. Just recently, we had some of the highest water levels ever recorded in Lake Michigan and other Great Lakes. So we have seen a lot more water of recent, and that if you look at the overall trends, we are likely in Wisconsin to receive more rainfall under climate change, but it will be more variable. We'll see more highs and lows.
Well, with that, I want to thank our audience and our panelists and presenters for such a lively and informative discussion. Our summer series has one remaining program, Hazardous Waste and Solid Waste, on August 19th. Again, we will feature Wisconsin infrastructure author presentations and invited professional Wisconsin panelists. Please register and join us. You can sign up at the events calendar on the LWV Wisconsin website, and that was put into the chat. It has been my pleasure to work with all of you, panelists, members of ASCE and LWV Wisconsin, and our partners all around the state. Thank you to the LWV Wisconsin staff and members for everything you do to facilitate these meetings. And thank you to the audience for your thoughtful and respectful questions. And thank you for taking your time on this day to spend these 2 hours with us. Louise Petering will continue and close out the meeting. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Ann. More thanks are due to Carl Sutter for arranging for the category authors for this series of infrastructure programs. Thank you also to Kenneth Micah and Jennifer Schaff, who were the volunteer co-chairs of the ASCE Wisconsin 2020 report card. Thanks too to Martin Hansen and Jake Bruniller for participating on the steering committee. Thanks to Martin Hansen and Jake, yes, and especially to Carol Diggleman. She organized these category meetings, and as the panel members recognized, she was in touch with you significantly in advance of these meetings. Congratulations are in order to the American Society of Civil Engineers Wisconsin section for their recent award as the National ASCE 2021 Advocate of the Year Award. The League values this partnership and this collaboration in the public interest. Next slide. Thank you to the League of Women Voters planning team, staff, and volunteer league members around Wisconsin for their contributions to this educational program about drinking water and wastewater. Your early and continued behind the scenes planning has been invaluable. Next slide. The League now urges the call to action, a call made more compelling by recent proposals for significant federal infrastructure spending. As the debate goes on in Washington, D.C. on infrastructure spending and around the nation, I urge you to read the American Society of Civil Engineers Failure to Act document. In this compelling report, ASCE forecasts that our current pattern of infrastructure underfunding will cost every U.S. household $3,300 on average every year for 20 years. We have spent what we have spent, and our spending now is not enough. Decision makers who hold the purse strings, as Carl said before, need to hear from us. So identify your local infrastructure priorities and begin conversations, tweets, Zooms, whatever, with your friends, neighbors, and local officials. Jot down those local infrastructure concerns and priorities. Tell those concerns more than once to your federal, state, county, and municipal elected officials. Sign up for our last category meeting to become better informed, and stay in touch with the League of Women Voters at LWVWI.org. Thank you. Next slide. Thank you for being with us this afternoon, and have a very good evening.